Hey guys, so I've got a 10-minute game, so this is a quicker end of rapid on the board, and my opponent is rated 7-8-2, 11 Pasha from Ukraine. So let's see how we go. So we have e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6. I'm going to play the Italian game. My normal opening at this point is to play the Scotch with d4, and then once they capture, I then play bishop to c4, which is the Scotch gambit. But we're going to keep things classical for now. My e4 pawn is undefended. If the knight takes that pawn, then I've got options of, like, if I castle now, I could put my rook on e1, or I could put my queen on e1 or e2, and that would cause black some issues, but let's keep things pretty standard. I'm going to play d3 and connect that pawn. I've got a nice little pawn chain going on in the center already. I think that d6 is a likely move at some point. I also have knight to g5 attacking the f7 square. Okay, so we have a pretty symmetrical pattern on the board right now. I do have the option of pinning the knight if I want to stop the knight coming in and attacking f2, which is my Achilles heel. I could play h3 to stop the knight coming in. Am I concerned about the knight coming in? Let's play h3. I'm going to play quiet moves, and I think what I'm going to be focusing on is just keeping solid and making sure that my pieces are defended, that they're protecting each other, that my pawn structure remains fairly intact, and I just want to castle and really let my opponent make the first error in this game. So I'm going to take my time. I'm going to follow all basic principles. This is a pretty standard game so far. It's basically the gioco piano with knight on f6. Gioco piano would be to play the bishop out on that move. Okay, and black has copied me. This is not a problem. So I've got the option. I can play knight to c3, developing a piece. My bishop doesn't have a huge future. I mean, it could go to d2, it could go to e3. If e3, then there's a chance of bishop takes and pawn takes. That would change things a little bit. I don't really want to play my knight to d2. Let's do that. I'm going to play bishop to e3 and see if black is minded to trade dark squared bishops at this point in the game. Also has a check here, which can be met by c3. I'm quite happy to open up the f file, possibly for my rook, so I can still castle kingside if this pawn captures on e3, and it gives my rook a pretty good run up towards there. Okay, so black has decided to defend the bishop there with b6. Okay, so we have a kind of a standoff going on. One option could be c3, queen b3, creating a barrage against f7. I think that's okay. My queen can move. It's not the only defender of anything. That knight's defended by a pawn, bishop's defended by a pawn, bishop's defended by a pawn. If pawns come out to here, my bishop has an escape. So I'm okay. There we go, as predicted. All right. I'm going to capture. Queen can't recapture, so it will have to be the knight. Now, if I capture the bishop, then black is going to have doubled pawns and isolated. So I don't want the knight to capture me there. So we've now got, what? I've got two attackers against this bishop and only one defender. So one way to defuse that is by initiating the exchange. And if pawn recaptures, then I have a superior pawn position. Or at least black has a weakened situation there. Okay, so I'm now looking at these relatively weak pawns in the middle of the board. The knight is under threat, defended only by the queen. Is black going to castle now? I think I should be thinking about castling pretty soon. I've still got queen to b3, with then 2 attackers on against the knight. So that's definitely a possibility. I'd like to castle. I think kingside is the correct way. Okay, my opponent's... Oh, my opponent's moved. Okay, he's done the recapture. I didn't realise it was my move. Okay, is there any problem there with queen to b3? Let's have a think. What can this knight do? It can come in there, it's okay. It can come in there, that's okay. How about knight to here? If knight there, I'll probably just castle. I think that's alright. Okay, let's prod with an attack. So this knight is now overloaded. It's got 2 attackers and only 1 defender. Black could bring the bishop out there, which would be alright. Then we've got 2 attackers, 2 defenders, and it would not be my interest to initiate that exchange. So if bishop out there, bishop takes, queen takes, and I lose my last piece. Alright, thinking maybe good time for knight to d2. These knights would then be paired. Alright, so, a counter attack beckons. So I've still got an option of take knight. No, I don't really. So actually my queen's going to have to come out of there. That was a decent move by my opponent. I'm thinking queen a4 looks good because it's attacking this knight, which will then be pinned. That will probably prompt bishop to d7. So maybe I don't want to be doing that. I think right now I'm just going to drop my queen back to d1. I'm still pretty secure here. Knight can't go there. I'll think about castling, think about bringing my knight out. Whoa, dropped a pawn. You devil. He's playing alright, isn't he? Okay. Right, the rook can't take a2, can't take b1. I'm going to go ahead and castle. This pawn is still protected by the knight, and then my queen and my rooks will all be connected on the back rank. That's alright. So I'm going to be definitely wanting to think about rook to e1. My opponent hasn't castled yet, and he's going to be... I've got threats now against the rooks. I've got maybe my queen to c1. Okay, this is interesting. I've got now possibility of takes. It's a free pawn, actually, with a threat on the knight. Then if the knight moves, I can capture the queen with my queen, but it's defended by a knight. I can't move my bishop there because the rook will just take it. If I move my rook to e1, that prevents this pawn from capturing either way, because it would expose the king, putting the king in check, so that would be an illegal move. So candidate moves are rook e1 or captures. Captures is interesting because it puts pressure on this knight and wins back my pawn. I'm going to play rook e1 just to mix things up. I'd like to bring my queen out to look at f7. The anticipation that this knight is not going to stay there for very long. Another possibility could even be to bring my bishop back to b3 and trap the rook. That could be fun. You also need to keep a bit of an eye on time, but still making sure that my pieces are secure. So I've got thinking about options for this knight now. Okay. So I still have a free pawn on e4, which will put pressure on the knight there. The knight will move, because otherwise the pawn will just take the knight. So when the knight moves, we're then going to have queen facing queen. And I don't know if I want to have that situation. I've got also rook e4, rook takes e4 is a possibility. It gives me options to swing my rook across, but it can't come to here or here because, well, it could maybe come to h4. I don't want to push. I think that's probably the best move I have right now. Now the knight is double attacked. It's going to have to move. Can't go there. Can't go there because it'll be taken by my knight. Can't go there because it'll be taken by my pawn. I could dodge my queen out of the way and attack the rook, making the rook retreat. Can't go there, 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 so it's going to have to come to one of these three squares. So that's queen c1 is a candidate move. Alright, that was kind of expected. So if I play that, I think that's now a fork, isn't it? Okay, so let's think. Queen c1 attacking the rook. Knight comes in to here with check. I can capture the knight and then rook recaptures. That's the issue. Queen c1, knight in with check. King moves. And then he's still got to rescue his... Yeah, king moves and then the knight is double attacked. Okay, so let's try that. Queen c1. I'm anticipating knight e2. Oh, ho. Okay, right. I can see what he's doing. So he's thinking rook takes and then knight takes with a beautiful fork on the king and queen. Unfortunately, he's miscounted his attackers and defenders, because that square is also guarded by my light squared bishop on c4. So I'm going to go ahead and capture with a bishop, putting myself a rook up. Right? First things first, how many pieces are looking at that square? Right? How many attackers? How many defenders? What have we got? So situation now is I've just captured the rook. I've gone a rook up. This knight is also unprotected, since I moved my queen there. Okay, so that knight's going to have to come up with another idea. I've got ideas of rook to d1 attacking the queen. It's a pretty good situation right now. Black still has the double pawns. Okay, I can't have the fork there, so I'm going to capture with the bishop. Queen can recapture. And then I'm well ahead in material, so for me right now it makes sense to exchange queens and go into an ending. Can't see a problem with that. Where can the queen go to get out of trouble? 1, 2, 3 squares. That's it. So if the queen doesn't want to exchange, it's got to go up. She's got to go up that side of the board. I want to get this knight out of the way. I want to connect these rooks. All basic opening stuff. Fundamental principles. Nothing fancy. Nothing clever. So the error, the blunder that I was waiting for turned out to be the simplest of miscalculations. How many pieces are looking at that square? If black had taken another 20 seconds just to check out the board, maybe even hover with the piece before dropping it onto that square, it'd have saved the material. But now the difference of a rook is it's very significant, let's say. So we'll see what my opponent does. I've got 3 minutes 20 on the clock. If we do get into an ending, because we've got a small increment on this, it might be like a 10-10 or something like that, then I think that will be in my favour, because I will generally be able to visualize the moves more quickly than my opponent can. Okay, I've got knight a3, but it's kind of ugly, and the knight would be undefended on that square, so that would kick the queen. Other options to try and force the exchange. Queen d5, how about that? Queen d5 attacks both the queen and the knight. Queen there is defended by a pawn. This pawn is safe, that pawn is safe. Let's go for it. With less than 3 minutes on the clock, I can't hang around too long over my moves, but at the same time I don't want to rush, I don't want to blunder. This pawn's undefended. All these pieces are undefended. That pawn on a7's undefended. So there are definite weaknesses. And this really is something that you see with more experienced players, is that they're constantly checking that everything's guarding everything else. Right? You don't want weaknesses in your camp. And I'm amazed when I watch masters play, IMs, GMs play, they coordinate their pieces so well. So this really will work in my favour if I can force black to trade. I mean, he's got queen b5 or queen a6, which protects the knight there. Queen b5 also protects this pawn. Okay, right, we'll go for the exchange. I'm not going to think twice about that. And knight out to attack the bishop leaves c3 undefended. I need to make sure that I cover that off. Also, I might think about pushing my pawn up and trying to break open his king. But really right now, if we just go ahead and simplify, if I can trade all these minor pieces off the board, then we've got a situation where I've got 2 rooks, he's got 1. Okay, that pawn's defended, that's okay. I'd like to put a fork in there, but I can't right now. What other ways have I got of attacking the bishop? Move my rook to d1 with a discovery. Let's try that, that's okay. Relatively safe. So I could think about this, which would then be attacking that pawn there on c5, and with a discovered attack on the bishop. The tactics in chess, I mean, I've been recently kind of mapping out all the different tactics with the idea of creating a new course. These knights are protecting each other, so I'm quite happy there. The tactics in chess are relatively straightforward. The difference becomes the speed and the depth at which a player can, there's a blunder, the player can visualize those tactics, spot the patterns that can give rise to tactics. That's the big difference. So I think even when grandmasters play, what you see is, I mean, chess is still mainly tactics. You can use tactics to improve your position, to try and ruin your opponent's position, to try and gain material advantage, to try and gain strategic positional advantage. But it's really, until you're a master level, it's all really about tactics. I mean, that's how games are won and lost. It's really not about openings and theory and prep. So what I found is that by focusing on tactics, I think it's improved my game in the last few days, because I'm thinking about examples that I could put into a future course of, okay, where are the pins and the forks and the forced moves and the traps and everything like that as well. And that really has just made me, I think, expand my vision a little bit in the game, which seems to be working pretty well. So this pawn here is defended 3 times. And the error that we've seen in this game, literally counting attackers and defenders, is really one of the most absolute basics. Okay, so thoughts about making inroads into this situation. So maybe he's thinking about pushing a pawn. That doesn't really bother me. I might lift my rook. I put my rook here. I can bring my other rook behind it. This rook's now defending the knight, which was undefended. It's also protecting the g4 square, so if the pawn pushes, I capture with check. That's all good for me. Might even think about pushing h4, but the question to this pawn, can't really push ahead because I capture with check. Okay, let's try that. And if he captures, I can recapture with the knight. This has still got 2 defenders, 2 attackers. Right now it's got 3 defenders. So I can afford to do that. Oh, right, yeah, of course. Okay. So now he's defended his own pawn. That's not a bad move at all. I'm going to put my knight there. Got ideas now of rook f4 and then capturing on f7. I want to bring my other rook into the game as well. Opponent's down below 2 minutes. Alright, so I can capture that pawn. It does leave a discovered attack on the rook, but if rook captures, knight can recapture. So I think that's a free pawn. I'm going to take it. And there's a threat here of pawn f7 with check wins the rook. So if black has any sense, he's going to exchange rooks, or at least get this fella out of harm's way. But either way, he's going to have the pawn in the king's face. Okay, so he's gone for the exchange. I think that's sensible. I think that's a decent move. I'm now up a knight and a rook. So I'm going to clear the board. I'm going to clear space for an ending. Takes. Let's engage my rook. Bring my rook in. So I'm looking at d7 and these 2 pawns here. The second of which is actually guarded by the knight, so I need to be careful about that. Okay, let's throw in a check. So the king can't move away from the defense of this knight, so I can capture his knight. He's got a choice of 2 knights that he can grab. Other than that, this is looking very safe. I can move maybe the knight on e4 to g3. That's attacking this pawn. The king can't get to the defense of the pawn in time. So I'm going to prepare that. I'm not going to pre-move it, but I'm going to just hover with it. I've got 1 more minute than my opponent on the clock, so I'm feeling relatively comfortable there. Also notice that the king is corralled on this half of the board because of my rook. Right, my rook is creating this force field there, so that king cannot do anything. Okay, let's come in. I'm going to start thinking about tidying up these pawns. I'm going to just pop that in first. Defends both of these pieces. It's quite possible I could win on time here. But it was a pretty solid game for the first part at least. Alright, let's push the h pawn up the board. Give the king something to worry about. Okay, the pawn's currently protected, so I'm going to go in here. These 2 are unprotected, so I'm going to win one of them. He can't protect either. He could move one, but whichever one he moves, I'm going to capture the other. Down to 40 seconds now. I'm 2.5 minutes. So because I've been moving fairly quickly, I also have a fork there with the knight, which I missed. Okay, let's grab that pawn. This would be a pin. Okay. There. Oh no, he can't move there because look, the rook is guarding the whole 7th rank. So actually this pawn now has a free run to the corner and can queen. These pieces are all safe. That one's safe. The only unprotected piece on the board is c3, but I'm not concerned about that because I'm now looking at a win. 20 seconds left on the clock. Queen with check, that's good. Let's think about where this queen can go. That comes with check. King is running out of options. Check again. Check again. Queen's defending the rook there. Relatively few options for the king. Okay. Still has a pawn move, so there's no real risk of stalemate. A knight in there, I think, would be checkmate. Oh no, he's got this. Okay. Alright. Knight's not defended, so I'm going to move it back. King does have options. He's got at least one square. Always have to check that. Queen can now capture the pawn. Throw in a check. And that's checkmate. Brilliant. Okay. So, yeah, I think on the whole, pretty decent game. Pretty much what I would expect for somebody rated between 700 and 800. They understood the rules. They followed some basic principles. They let themselves down a little bit on some quite basic tactics, the simplest tactics. So there you go. That is how to beat a player rated 700 to 800. Hope that's been useful for you. Hope you've picked up a couple of things. I'll see you next time.